Okay, thank you. Welcome and good evening to our Monday, June 17th meeting of the Legal Contracts and Board Policy Committee meeting. It is 5:46, and we will start this evening with our previous meeting summary. If anybody has any questions, comments, concerns, discussion over the meeting minutes from our May 13 meeting. And for those of us with packets, I will use this time. Our agenda is the first item in the packet, since we have so many things, and the meeting notes are the second.
So, Madam Chair, I would say no comments. I think the minutes properly reflect what happened during the last committee meeting.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to Section 2. In Section 2, we have several first reads tonight. We're going to start with Policy 1651, regular meetings. There are two options here for a first read, and I think that the question here is which one we will go with about withdrawals or additions to agenda items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, so I offered this amendment, withdrawals or additions of agenda items shall be made no later than 2 business days prior to the regular board meeting. And so I know that the administration had a recommendation. So did you want to just discuss? I think mine is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Sykes, and good evening. Yeah, the administration submitted, after some consultation, I guess another version, and basically what it states is it's providing an exception to the 2 business day rule of removing something in 2 limited circumstances. One would be an exception for urgent necessity under the Ohio Revised Code for operations of the district, i.e. contracts. And then the other exception would be consistent with matters involving personnel issues, such as, someone who, for example, we terminated and then they changed their mind at the last minute to go with a resignation. So I tried to limit that down to those 2 narrow exceptions. And then I added, for your consideration, is the superintendent can make this decision about an exception, however, must provide notice to the board president. So that was a late addition I shared with Ms. Sykes, and would ask that we could maybe move this one forward.
And so for clarification, for those of us following along, since there are 2 versions here, as discussed, one has a row and a half that's highlighted, the other has 3-ish rows that are highlighted. So for the rest of our conversation, if we could call the one with only 1 row highlighted version A, and the one with 3 rows highlighted version B, so we can have clarification of what we're referencing. Thank you. Member Sykes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would say that the exception, I think, should be not just informing our president, but in consultation with our president, so that our president would be able to have an opportunity to respond, especially after sharing it with other board members in the event that we have comments.
So my question is, in version B, would we then be adding language, in your recommendation, be adding language to version B, or is version B necessary because we can make those additions during the meeting or discuss that agenda item as the meeting starts? We can have an agenda and then follow it as needed procedurally.
Madam Chair, my recommendation would be first to hear the opinion of the president, since she would be involved in this, or the vice president, since she could be involved in this also. What do you think?
So I'm absolutely okay with this. Version B, and also, with notice. I mean, that could be changed, with consultation, in consultation with the board leadership. I'm okay with that.
So, Madam Chair, would you say, and Madam President, would you say board leadership, or would you say board president and vice president? Would you want to make it very clear president and vice president, or just president?
I mean, typically it's the board president, but I want us to be able to, leadership in general, be able to handle this matter if it were to arise, so that the superintendent is not hindered in any way. So, but I look at it as one of the already standing duties of the president anyway, so.
Making sure I'm recognized. Ms. Sykes has taught me well. I learn quickly. All right. I think the language, because based off our policy, the agenda is confirmed and created with the board president and the superintendent.
Consultation.
So that it's clear in that way. And so I think the language should be consistent. And to your point, as I understand it, in the event that you were unavailable, based on my role is, so if you were not able to be assessed, then naturally the superintendent should then come to the vice president so that the work wouldn't be hindered. So I think making the language consistent and clear, in my opinion, and not generalize it, will be better for even us now and moving forward. To keep, just to make the consultation edit, and just to make sure it's clear to board president, because by default, if you're not available, it naturally should come to the vice president of the board.
Yeah, I would be in agreement with that, and so just changing it to consultation. That would be with president.
It's fine.
And for the committee, would we like to see notice changed to consultation for another first read here at the policy committee, or do we feel like that one word is sufficient to move forward for a second read at the next board meeting?
Madam Chair, I think it's sufficient for read at the next board meeting.
Agree.
I just realized Heidi isn't here, so I have to write that in my notes this time. So 10651B notice. All right, moving on. Thank you. We are now moving on to policy 147, compensation. This was brought up because what we had in policy might look like it was conflicting with Ohio Revised Code. So then we are changing the language to show that we will not, it's up to the statutory amount for Ohio Revised Code. And then we had another question that was posed about the compensation for training programs. And so that ended up being separate and board discretion. So as it stands now, and for the record, board members up for Ohio Revised Code, we can make up to $5,000 a year. Not what Google makes it look like it says, but it is $5,000 a year. And that is how our policy here stands for a first read. Any comments, questions, discussion?
Madam Chair, I think it's fine. I think we should just refer to consent agenda.
All right, moving 147 along, first read to the consent agenda. And next for a first read, we have policy 131. Legislative. This was brought after one of our special board meetings. And so adding language prior to amending or adopting a bylaw or policy under emergency, the board shall declare that emergency exists by an affirmative vote of 6 members of the board. Comments, questions, concerns for the first read?
Just for clarity, because I remember discussing this, and I thought the discussion was the majority.
Yes. Hi, Haley Kapchar, Retzel Andrus. There was discussion last month about whether or not the 6. Sorry, I'm multitasking here. Whether or not the 6 supermajority number was statutory or whether the 3/4 was statutory. It's not a statutory requirement. However, Robert's Rules does require a 2/3 vote. So that would be 5. That being said, the board at its discretion can require more than that. It would be our recommendation to do 5 based on the conversation that we had last month. And I think that should cover the questions that were posed.
Yes, Madam Chair, I remember the conversation, and it was because the conversation was that it would mean that one board member actually could stop the whole process. So with just 5 board members as opposed to 6 board members, and 2/3 being Robert Rules of Order.
So as we're changing the language here where it says 6, should we change, does it matter if we change it to 5 or to 2/3?
It's a good question. I just said question. It's a good question. Should we put in 2/3?
We could put in 2/3 if, I mean, it would be helpful if there was ever to be more members of the board, as long as it's 2/3 consistently. And we would also recommend that the following sentence after the green highlighted would be changed to 2/3 as well, in accordance with Robert's Rules.
Then I propose this move to our board agenda, but switching to 2/3 in both sections. Okay, we are chugging right along here. Next section, we are at 204, first reading of policy 7544, social media. I know Mr. DeFaba brought the social media policy to us, so I will let you go ahead and explain.
Thank you. Just by a refresher, we've presented this a few times, the administration, and I'll make it very brief as I don't want to interrupt how well we're moving tonight. But basically, it regulates 3 areas. One, it provides that the Director of Communications will be tasked with overseeing all social media across the district, and that's a big area, so we know if there's a live, website, Facebook post, if it's live, some people leave and it still stays open, posts pop up, so it's just a way to go ahead and clean that up. The second part is about users who are using district-wide social media regulations. And then there is a narrow area that will regulate users on even their own machine, the computer, if they're holding themselves out as a district employee. So those are the 3 broad areas of regulation. And you'll also notice that there will be an accompanying exhibit, Exhibit A. And I think this is really helpful. It's called moderation of third-party content. And all that really simply means is there's certain times that you can, under the First Amendment, you can go ahead and delete a comment. So as we're all well aware of social media, you post something, sometimes you get some pretty nasty comments back on there. There's a limitation on what you can and cannot do, and Exhibit A provides a pretty good handout for all members who are going to operate district social media on what they can remove and what they cannot remove. So that's really, a compilation of what we're trying to do on behalf of the administration.
So for clarification on Exhibit A,
Okay.
I know you said this is what people can and can't remove. Is this also an example of what people could or could not do on their own personal
No.
No.
Exhibit A is simply for those folks who the Director of Communications states, hey, Mike, go ahead and operate a labor relations Facebook. That'd be an exciting one. So go ahead and run your own, and then someone posts something on there, and I have to look at this to see whether I can go ahead and delete a negative comment. If you do, sometimes you'll run afoul of the First Amendment. So this is really going to be a handout for all users across the district to help guide them on what they can and cannot do when they have a bad negative comment. Okay. From the public.
Thanks. And then one more follow-up question about the employee use of social media on their own accounts.
Sure.
If it's not the employee's social media account, but maybe someone was out somewhere on vacation and they ended up on someone else's social media account, could they then be in trouble, for lack of a better term, through this social media policy?
The only way, Dr. Molinar, I could see that is if the person somehow was held out as a district employee. You know, example, this is our HC party in North Carolina. Something would have to identify these folks. That's the only time, that's the nexus you have to employment, is if someone holds themselves out as a district employee. That's the requirement. So I guess, you know, I never liked when law professors answer this question, maybe. It's possible, but it maybe not, or maybe someone could be culpable depending on the circumstances around the post, which would require a detailed analysis of looking at it. So I don't mean to be vague, it's possible.
Any other discussion from the committee?
Madam Chair, I have no objections to the language here.
Agree.
So I will highlight moving policy 7544 for a first read in our next meeting.
No, Madam Chair, I would say that I don't know why we need to have this as a first read at our next meeting, because our next meeting will be 2 board meetings from this board meeting. And so I think it is important that we have something out there that the employees should expect in the way that we expect them to conduct themselves from a social media standpoint. And we have discussed this quite a bit, so I think this should move on to the regular agenda.
Sorry, yeah, I meant second reading. That's what I meant.
For the regular agenda.
Yeah, regular agenda.
Board meeting.
Right.
Thank you.
All of the items in section 2 are considered a first reading while they're here in committee.
Okay.
And then we bring them to the full board for a second reading.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. And next, policy 155 committees. We added the language here that generally and when possible, committee agendas shall be made available to the public 7 calendar days prior to a scheduled committee meeting. I know personally I have tried to do that with this committee, and this year it was new for us, but I am excited that we are doing this. I really liked to be able to say, personally my opinion, I like to be able to say in our last meeting that this agenda was already ready for anyone who wanted to see or prepare what was coming up before our meeting today. So that is 155 committees. Is there any discussion on this first reading?
No objection to the language.
Thank you. So with that, this will be another policy that will move to the full board for a second read. And I think our last one in this section was brought to us by Ms. Carter, Field and other district-sponsored trips. This is a first reading of this policy.
So this is field trips. This is field trips and other sponsored trips.
And so we are looking at this policy, updating this policy, because it hasn't been updated since 2015, excuse me. And I'm trying to remember.
This right here.
Oh, yes, background check. Yep. All right, so we are requesting that this be added into our field trip policy because right now on some of our field trip paperwork, we do have certain forms that our chaperones need to fill out. But one of the things that was missing was the criminal records check, and they would be responsible to cover that on their own. And so the addition reads, all non-employee volunteer chaperones shall provide a set of fingerprints so that a criminal records check can be conducted. The criminal records check will be done as a condition of service as a chaperone and will be at the chaperone's expense. If a criminal records check indicates that a chaperone has been convicted of or pleaded guilty to any of the offenses described in RC, and it states the codes there, the chaperone will be informed that he or she will not be permitted to serve as a chaperone on any field or district-sponsored trips. That would be the addition.
My question would be, Madam Chair, may I, to the Chief of Staff, so what is the cost of the background check?
Right now it's $46.
$46. And follow-up, Madam Chair, is it possible for the school to I mean, it's difficult to get chaperones, and I know how difficult it is to have chaperones. What's been your experience with paying? Well, we haven't had them do that, so you haven't had an experience in whether or not the parent or grandparent or family member would find that $46 difficult for them to pay. What I'm just wondering what's.
Well, I know that back when we did have ESSER funds, and with some positions, we assisted employees with background checks, but that's when we had like extra funding. And then right now we don't have anything set up. That is something that we could possibly talk to the Treasury Department with, setting aside funds based on first come, first. I don't know how it would look, but it's a discussion we could have with the Treasury Department. If that's the will of the board, we could do that. But right now, we don't have anything in place to support volunteers with background checks. They would be responsible for doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's been my experience as well. I know the PTA, we would pay for that as well. So I think it's different. But when you think about the economic situation of most of our families, I just don't want it to be a barrier, because sometimes that's all someone might have to give is their time. And then the other thought is the timeliness of it. Like, is this something that we would consider like pushing out at the beginning of the year so these chaperones are on the ready? Because I know those background checks, the turnaround time, the field trip is come and gone.
Absolutely. So typically we'll get a background check back the same day or sometimes even just the next day. It's held up only if mostly when things are going to show up on there, but it doesn't mean it's a disqualifying offense. Like, that person still could, but that is something we could do with our communication going out at the beginning of the school year, is to emphasize that if you're interested in chaperoning on a field trip, that this is something you would need to have in place.
So this would be something that when we meet with principals in August, that we would ask them to put on their back to school or open house agenda, so that any parents that are interested in chaperoning trips at any point in time of the year would know up front to go ahead and get theirs done, so that they could be ready to go to start the year off with field trips.
And Madam Chair, just a follow-up. So is that annually? Would they have to do that every year?
Every year they have to do another one.
To get a new background check.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, I implemented this at my school. They have to get the FBI and BCI background check. Because it gets any of those gray areas that slides through. And actually what made me implement this in my school was because of an incident that made like news about a person on PTA like actively participating and was basically people who prey on kids go where children are, right? But I say all that to say, when we think about funding this, President Autry, I think it's for me, right now, the quickest solution is fundraising will be an effort of a PTA, parent organization, or some of our partners to fundraise and to think about ideas. Because when people just have their time and maybe not necessarily resources, some fundraising efforts just take time and not necessarily resources, and using relationships and connections. And in my opinion, those parents who are active, those grandparents, the aunties, godparents that want to go on trips also will be engaged with engaging community members for a fundraiser, something that's it costs nothing but the time. Like I don't want to promote any specific fundraiser, but I do have one in mind that I'm participating in right now where it doesn't cost you anything except for your time to set up a little pop-up and use your connectedness with others around you. So I think we need to also put that back, because if you're engaged and you really want to participate, we need to start promoting fundraising and fundraising efforts in the form of those PTAs and things like that. And I know, President Autry, you have a lot of experience with that and how we can like maybe create that great models district-wide, because as I understand, all of our schools don't have thriving PTAs, and how we can make it to where it's a consistent thing throughout our schools in some capacity, like grandmoms. Someone can help me in the board. Someone was telling me that they had this organization years ago in Akron, like of grandmothers that would read to children at the like Head Starts or things. I'm sorry? Oh, foster grandparents, thank you, Member Sykes. Something like that, where even if the school population may not necessarily have the numbers of active participants, that community members, when we talk about how can you engage, as we talked about the last board meeting, this will be a great way for them to engage, but also engage and raise revenue to take care of things like background checks and things like that. So I think that would be something to really consider and to push early on. The information should be going out every end of the year and throughout the year, the beginning of the year, then at the end of the year when they go home, that you're going to need background checks to participate in this. And we may have community members who donate funds, like United Baptist Church. I'm not putting them out to donate. I'm saying this because they donated funds from the marathon they gave it to our class to book though, right? And so funds like that, when you have organization, church that will gift money, we may find someone to gift $500 towards background checks, or pennies equal dollars. So just self-sufficiency and reliance, I think, is important to stress too.
All right, thank you. So we have policy 2340 moving to the next board agenda for a second read to the full board.
Full board agenda.
Full board.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That concludes section 2. So we are moving on to section 3, roundtable. The first item here in roundtable is policy 5120. There are 2 versions of 5120 currently in your packet. The one we're going to call version A will be the one that is up on the screen presently, and version B is the one that is on the books presently. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So, so version B is the one that was approved in the special meeting in March of this year. Version A is the one that we had another special meeting to go through. We've been discussing and playing with this language for a few meetings now. I believe we're at a compromise, and so this is why, at least in my opinion, why we have the section 2 and the section 3, because if we feel this is ready for a first read, I'd like to see this without all of the different colors and the crossouts, and what it would just look like plainly. So if this one is ready for a first read. So discussion from the committee.
Madam Chair, I think that the superintendent annually would be appropriate, since we should look at this constantly anyway. And what is the other language? I would do the strikeouts. It's difficult for me to figure this out.
Exactly. I understand, and that's part of the reason too why we have the roundtable versus the actual first read. So in the strikeouts, some of the other difference are that we would have 2 consecutive board meetings. Thank you. And the 30 days. A lot of the language basically that was removed in March in order to expedite the process was put back in. But not exactly, because some of it was confusing before, and so we tried to work together and clarify.
So, Madam Chair, may I ask if you could read the way that this would
Sure.
read?
Would you like me to just read it through?
Yes.
Yeah, not a problem.
I can't. Yeah, my eyes keep going. I don't know.
The superintendent shall recommend to the board any changes in the attendance areas at any regular or special board meeting. 30 days prior to the superintendent recommending changes in attendance areas to the board, the superintendent shall provide notice of the proposed changes to the board and parents/guardians of current Akron Public School students. The recommended changes in attendance areas shall be brought to the board at 2 consecutive special or regular board meetings for review and public comment. The board shall then vote on the proposed changes at any regular or special board meeting. Should the board vote to change attendance areas, the superintendent shall provide notice of the board-approved changes. I want to make sure I'm not, sorry, excuse me. It is hard to read. In attendance areas to the parents/guardians of current Akron Public School students. No other notices shall be issued by the district regarding proposed changes to and/or board-approved changes to attendance areas.
I have one question about the last sentence. Was that in the
Original language?
February of 2024 version? No other notices shall be issued? I can find it.
No, it wasn't.
It says additional. It's like additional public notice may be provided.
Oh, that's a good point.
We changed it to.
Yeah. Just for real clarity, really quick, Dr. Molinar. So what it currently reads,
Yes.
as I just lost it, additional public notice may be provided as determined by the board or district. The suggested revision is no other notices shall be issued by the district regarding proposed changes to and/or board-approved changes to attendance areas. So it is modified from what the language was and what's current. Thank you.
Would that language prevent the district from communicating if it says no other notice shall be issued? If we wanted to communicate, would that make us not allowed to communicate?
I guess if I I mean, it's a pretty minor revision. I think we could state no other notices shall be required by the district, so then you could, if you wish to do so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question, and forgive me if this is answered somewhere in here because my eyes are crossing, but from what I recall, the challenge that I want us to address or overcome is changes that are brought. Does that start the process over? And I just want to make sure that that's explicit and clear in this, so that if something changes as a result of the public comment, because I know you went above and beyond, Superintendent, prior, visiting out in the communities, when you bring us changes, will that start the process over? So we have to do an additional 2 consecutive meetings? And I just wanted to be clear so that we don't run up against that again.
I think the last line, I think when writing this, we were trying to address that particular issue that you're talking about. So if we were to change it to no other notices shall be required by the district regarding proposed changes to and/or board-approved changes to attendance areas, other than the initial 30 days before. So it wouldn't start the 30 days over again. I think that's why we put that last line there, if that would help with addressing your question.
But the 2 consecutive meetings, that stands even in spite of changes that might be brought forth? Okay.
Yeah, what this ultimately would mean is that, so we sent a letter when we're getting ready to do this process, which we sent one initially. And then, like I went out and met with the community. I don't really want that to be a part of policy, because that's just something that I'm going to do to engage our community, our families. But I don't think that it should be put in policy. That's more of operational, the superintendent's purview to just kind of figure out how they're going to. But I would want to go to the communities, and just like we did before, because it was helpful, because when we heard from our community, we then went back and made changes, to things, trying to look at it through their lens and from their perspective. But I don't think that should cause us to have to go backwards and start the process all over again, unless there's something that's huge and significant that, we're not going to close down this building, but all of a sudden now we're going to close down this building. Well, that's a big change to the process, and so I think that is something. And each time we bring it to the board, we would indicate those changes. I guess I just want to keep reemphasizing that it is a proposal, and so there will be changes. Sometimes there will be things that we couldn't have planned for that happen in this process, but we would bring that to the board in these 2 meetings, and then is it the 3rd board meeting that the board would vote? Or
Yeah.
because it's two, okay.
So we voted the second or the third one?
Because I'm just looking at this and also the original policy.
Madam Chair, for clarity, this is my clarity as well, to give clarity. Because as I was understanding that for 2 consecutive meetings, so if we're saying 2 consecutive meetings, am I to understand at that second meeting, a vote can go forward, or then the 3rd meeting? Because of how the language is, does that make sense?
Yeah, presently in this version, it would be that 2 consecutive, so vote on the proposed changes at any meeting. So that, according to this language, it looks like we'd be able to vote at the second
I'm
meeting.
okay with that, only because there's so many. nuances and technical things that happen in the behind the scenes of things technologically, that like we have to really move on some of this stuff. But I also don't want us to go backwards into what we experienced the last time. So I'm okay with the 30-day notice, sending it up front to the parents and the community. And then we do what we're going to do. We bring it to the board to 2 consecutive meetings. And even after it's all over with, that's why I like shall be required, changing that other than outside of the last sentence.
I think, too.
Because we're still going to communicate anyway to our families like we did this last time, just to let them know. The only thing it was a little confusing for some of our families because they didn't understand why they were getting a letter. So they thought we were moving their kids from where they were, but it really had nothing to do with them. So I think when we worded the letters, that it might need to kind of be very specific. So I might be in a cluster where nothing is happening, but I'm getting this letter because it pertains to another cluster, and we just have to indicate that in the letter.
I was going to say, it almost seems like we could save money and paper by just informing the impacted cluster. And then the rest of the information
we did that as well.
Could be found on our website for those. Like if it doesn't directly, even though I understand it's the entire district-wide, maybe those updates can be maybe only the families directly impacted by whatever change. I don't know.
We sent the letter to the whole
district,
and then we
understand.
sent the letter specifically to the schools or the clusters that this pertained to.
I just think about printing charge, just being an administrator in school, I think about stuff like that, like the cost of the paper, the ink, the print, because that's very costly. And it seems like nothing because it's a letter, but that ink is so expensive. But I'm just, trimming the fat, but go ahead.
So, Madam Chair, the only thing that's clear on here to me is annually instead of period. It's annually. The other seems just as confusing as the original language.
Because honestly, Ms. Sykes, I think that this is just my thought. Again, I'm not an attorney, not trying to play one. This is more, all of this stuff that's down in this area here in the blue is more, I think, operational. So, like that, most people wouldn't probably understand what all this means because it's something that we're actually doing on our side. And so they're not going to really pay attention to the 30 days and all that stuff. But I think that might be what could be confusing because this is kind of what we actually would be doing.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think the main thing when I referred this to committee was to make it clear that we were not taking away the public opinion abilities to come before the board and speak whenever changes were taking place.
Right.
That was what we wanted to make sure that we did.
Yeah, and that's still.
Have we done that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And for me, what's hard on here is there's different colors, and some of it's striked out, and some of it's underlined, and it's hard to tell for me what's striked out and what's underlined. And so that's why, personally, I would love to see this as a first read, so it looks, in this format where nothing is underlined, nothing is striked through. It's just this is how it would look if it would pass. Period. Personally, I would find that very helpful. Because then we can just read it straight through without, the other options. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Heidi just read it for us, and I know that the only reason I mention this is because when we talk about the time that things like this spend in committee, and if we could move it forward with the understanding, as Member Sykes said, we wanted to make sure that the input of the public was not suppressed, and that's clear. That's been done here. We also are in agreement with the language as far as that revised to change from issue to required. And I think we're clear on that. It's not as, I get it with that, but I don't know if we need to belabor it with understanding unless someone objects to something that's stated in here because it's been read, a lot to read through personally because it keeps moving together, but I don't know if anyone has any unreadiness. I understand that, but I'm saying I think it can move forward to the board and where to which it will be clean up instead of keeping it in committee. That's just my recommendation, Madam Chair and Vice Chair.
So you'd like to move it to the full agenda for a first read on the board agenda?
What would it be the second?
Well, because it's not on here as a first read. It's not in the first.
Oh, okay. Well, you just added clarity. Then it couldn't. Then that wouldn't be appropriate, right?
So we.
Because if it hasn't had a
either
first.
way, it would save us like a week and a half.
Right, and so that's all, I mean, a week and a half. So I don't want to do anything that is not appropriate. Like, I don't want to do anything that's, if moving this forward it negates what's supposed to happen, like the first read. I understood, because it's not our first seeing of this in committee. So I thought once it's cleaned, it's just a matter of optics. So understanding, that's what I was understanding it to be. But if not, I don't want to do anything that is out of order, out of policy.
So, Madam Chair, just to be clear, so the 2 consecutive meetings is what will afford the public the opportunity to be able to come before the board and to speak.
Yes, and they also, Ms. Sykes, when we have the meetings in the community, we do allow the parents and the families to speak there too, which is how we were able to make changes based on some of the things that they told us.
So if it's okay with the committee, especially because this has been so sensitive, if we can keep this for a first read in committee, but cleaned up first read in committee next meeting, and then we can put it through, hopefully, like we did everything else for first read.
I would just note, Madam Chair, so this came before, I believe, March. This was March when we first saw this, and we're now in June. And the reason why I referred it to committee was because we wanted to make sure that the public had the opportunity to speak, but also to let them know we were not trying to hide anything, not trying to make them forget that we were working on this. So I am clear that the 2 consecutive meetings does not take away the public ability to come before the committee and to speak on any changes that may be made. And I think that was the objection that the community had with this. So I think it could move on to the regular board agenda, but so can we get it before? Can you make these changes? And we see, Madam Chair, to the attorney, can we
Are you asking me?
make these changes before so that it can get back on the agenda?
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
If that's okay.
But are you referring to putting it on to the agenda for the committee meeting for next month, or are you referring to the board meeting?
Board meeting.
It would be at Dr. Molnar's discretion.
Well, we have 2 board members here that's on the committee.
Right.
Just to be clear.
Right.
All right.
Well, the board's discretion. I apologize.
Yes, thank you. You're welcome. No problem. So you see what I'm saying, Dr. Molinar, is that you know how upset the community felt that we were trying to keep something from them, and we've been working on this since March, and this is whatever this date is, June something. So
I would be in favor of moving forward with it because we have been discussing it. It's just this looks busy.
It does.
But I can see that annually and then changing that term to not required, everything else I'm okay with. So I wouldn't object to moving it forward for a second read at the board meeting.
I am of the opinion, especially because this was a very sensitive policy, and we have been discussing it for months. And I am the kind of person that transparency, included in transparency, is routine and fulfilling expectations. And so even if we feel like we are doing the community a favor by getting this done a week and a half faster by putting it on the agenda sooner, I don't know if it would be easier to follow the routine and have a clear version that isn't dizzying for a first read and then bring it through a first read like we did this whole pile of policies. I think it would save us, like I said, I think it would save us a week and a half if we did the first read in the full board versus the first read in committee.
Madam Chair, I mean, a week and a half,
Yeah.
you can just change the world. It's just amazing what you can do in a week and a half. So my vote is to move it on to the regular agenda. That's my vote.
So if there are no objections from anyone else at the table, we can have a first read of 5120 at the full committee.
That is, you're saying, just so I'm clear of what I'm not opposing. Right. So you're at committee or at the board meeting? Because this been read in the committee multiple times. It's just the only trepidation that I'm understanding, and please clarify, is that because we don't like how it looks because things are striked out, not the content of it. It covered the issues, which is why it was a sensitive topic. It wasn't a sensitive topic because we see red, blue, and things underlined. It was a sensitive topic because Member Sykes, when she brought it up, and when the community was speaking out, it just seems as though we were trying to suppress the input of the community, which has been clarified in this. We're clear that that's been clarified. And so I'm just trying to make sure I'm following. When you say, so you wanted to come back to the committee, okay, that's what I was getting confused on. Please, thank you.
So if we do
Madam Chair.
a first read for the full board, I'm saying a first read for the full board instead of a second read for the full board because we are changing language. It is minor language, but it is not just to make it look prettier. We are still changing issued to required, and but we're making a change. So I am suggesting or saying first read full board.
Thank you.
All right. Next one here for roundtable. This is the first time we're seeing this one, but this is about the epinephrine, and I think this is a Neola policy, and a really important one.
Yes, so this is for emergency situations to issue either EpiPen or inhaler. And we would be working with Children's Hospital. They would provide the supplies around EpiPen and inhalers for the schools, as well as training, the health aides, as well as the principal in the issuing of the medication as relates to the procedures that we have in place for dispensement of medication. And say, for instance, if they had to use the inhaler, the hospital is providing spacers for students, and they would be able to keep that spacer so that once we do run out of the inhaler, the albuterol, then they would be able to replace that. But this is only for emergency situations. I've shared with people, I've had a situation where I had a student who passed away because the parent did not have an inhaler. She had taken the child home, and he passed away. But situations like this, if we were to have an emergency inhaler on site, we could use the emergency inhaler. Parents can go and take their child to be seen, to see if that's something that they would need to issue as it relates to them having an asthma attack and not having proper meds or being diagnosed properly by a physician. But we would have something on site if we notice the child is having an asthma attack or an allergic reaction, and they didn't have their EpiPen with them.
I noticed in both of these drafts, it looks like it's Neola 2016 policies. Is there any reason why, or do we know of a reason why we did not have policies like this until now, or why we're using the 2016 version?
Well, it's still up to date as it relates to, because we actually met with Children's Hospital, sat down with them side by side, and looked at the inhaler and the EpiPen. Neola policy and made it look like how we thought it should, and we were fine with Neola the way that it was already set up. And this is the first time that it was brought to Dr. Robinson. This is actually the first time I learned that Children's Hospital had something like this that they could provide. And then once we heard that this was something that they could provide, we definitely said, oh, absolutely, we would want this for our schools in order to help with keeping our children safe, or even staff.
I had a meeting with the CEO and his staff, and they've been wanting to provide this, but we have to have a policy, and so they sort of helped us with making sure that we had the right language and policy and working with legal as well. But it would give us the opportunity for our kids that don't have it, or an emergency happens at school. So I thought it was a great opportunity for us to, they are one of our big partners, but they've been wanting to provide this for us. So I just thought it would be but we have to have the policy before they would do it.
Often with the Neola policies, there are options that we select. Did these two policy templates come from Neola with any options? I don't see them.
Actually, it was blank. The actual Neola policy is, I don't want to say it was skinny, but do you know, it was, you can speak to how it looked when we first got it.
There wasn't much to it. So what we did, Ms. Carter and I, we sat down with two representatives from Akron Children's, and they actually came fully prepared and briefed with the Neola policies with the suggested recommendations. So, and I applaud them. I just wanted to publicly thank them for their assistance.
I would like to applaud my employer as well. But as a nurse, this is so important because asthma is one of the most common diseases that we see in our young African American students especially. And along with that, that puts them even at more risk of having allergies, which is the need for the EpiPen. So I appreciate to be able to have this within APS.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would just say also, and I have a child that has to use the EpiPens, and it can get really scary. And so, yes, I would suggest that we fast track this and send it to the board at the next board meeting for passage.
So we can send this to the board. It sounds like the will of the committee for a first read for the full board. I will say, though, in the future, I would appreciate if there is something else from Neola for me to be able to see. What is it that was there from Neola and what was added by the hospital, just to know what the difference is.
The Neola updates is public information. Anyone can access things about Neola, right? Or you don't have to be the policies, or does you have to be a member school? Is it
It's
like a
membership subscription.
So yeah, so the community wouldn't be able to see it, but us as board members, will we be able to, or would we have to? I'm asking because to Member Molnar's point, say if she wanted to go look at it in her own time, would she have access to go look at that?
So that is, Heidi can help out with that.
Okay.
Because Heidi has a login to Neola, and she's our person that contacts them.
Gotcha.
But they have to, I understand at least, that they have to provide that to us. And certain people have logins, but it's really tricky, is my understanding, who has access to it and who doesn't.
Okay, that's why I wanted to get clarity.
Right.
But so it would be something as simple as if Member Molnar asks Heidi, hey, can you give me a copy of what the original language was? She can just receive a copy?
I would say yes. It's upon request. So,
Okay, no worries. I just wanted to make sure that was known publicly, that it's accessible, and that if Member Molnar, because I think people, their convictions should be adhered to, that she can reach out to Heidi and she can review that in her own time. And then if something comes up, which I don't know what could, but just in case, she can share with her committee
Sure.
and be aware of that, because I think this is important. and the EpiPens are like a couple $100s per pen. And I just know, being in education, that anything that could expedite something like this and put this in my buildings, I want it, because it's life-saving. And any paperwork I can read about, because it ain't killing or poisoning kids, it's saving kids, I would look at later, just for the record. But I wanted to make sure that we all know, the community know, it's accessible, and that Member Monarch could get it to review in advance, like if she needed to, I assume. Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to point out, because this is a roundtable, and so just generally set an expectation when we bring things to a roundtable, these are the types of information that would be very useful to the committee, because the committee can't, like, even though this has been on the agenda for a week, I don't have that login. So I thought that was going to be part of the presentation to the committee, and I didn't know until after it that it wasn't. So just preparation.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I would not disagree with you on that, except in these areas of expertise, which I do not have. And I think that to hear the administration say that they sit down with the hospitals, and the hospital gave you this recommendation, that there is nothing I could add to this. Absolutely nothing. As much as I think I know, there is nothing I could add to this, because this is just not my area of expertise. Now, the president could add something, because that's her area of expertise, but this is a specialized area here. So that's why I think we should move it ahead to the board.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we will it be at a point of approval before school starts, because then we could start the year off. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's my
we would
intent.
start the year off with, because they won't provide it to us until it's been approved.
Well, I would just say, for full disclosure, my intent was to ask that the rules be suspended and to pass it on the first reading before the board.
Okay. Moving on, Section 3, discussion of attendance and credit recovery policies. Member Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I recommended that this be brought to the board because of our student board member, Zaya West, who presented to us regarding her situation with credit recovery, an IB student that appeared to be doing academically well, typically, but ran into some problems. I think she said, her attendance suffered because of some personal things, some illness, a family, and so as a result, she had to retake a class, having failed the class. So she went into credit recovery for 1 credit, and although it gives you the credit, you cannot replace your A with that F, so it still negatively impacts the student's GPA. The reason why we as an educational institution needs to look at this, because that cumulative GPA being impacted, it is very hard to bring it up. And for certain scholarship monies that students may try to get and apply for their junior year, a F in an honors class weighs more than, the F is an F, but it hits your GPA harder, especially in the honors course. And so I just thought we need to look at this, because as I also shared with Member Hall, in 98 graduating and facing some similar situations, is almost like an oppressive policy of students that may even be trying to thrive because they can't. It's like it's a no-win situation. And so, they get to graduate. Someone said something to me in the community, very flippant, an educator, and said, "Oh, well, they get the credit. It's about the credit. It's not about the grade." And I said, "Well, see, it's about both, because that GPA matters. And if you're at a 2.9 and the minimum for this scholarship is a 3.0, and you're competing against people with 3.5s and 3, and you need it, it makes a difference." So I want us to look at this policy, and I said this may be a legislative issue. It may be something greater than what this board can do. And so these are things I'm passionate about and I want to agitate about. And the reason why I say I don't know if this is like a legal or like higher than us thing is because with athletes, but I know, teachers and things, coaches can collaborate, but I know that in athletes, you can take if a child is not performing well, that sometimes teachers will allow the student to like retake a test or do something so that they'll be eligible to play. I mean, this is back in the day. I don't have a teacher's name to give anyone and saying anyone's doing this now. But I have brothers that play sports. And I think that's good practice. Because if I'm worried about you getting the content and I'm saying that you can retake this, but it should be offered to any student. Whether you're an athlete, whether you're Zaya West, a student that fell into some situation where you're a summer hall, your mother wakes up one day, just cannot walk, and now you're responsible for your siblings, and so it's making you be late to school. These type of policies appear to be hindrances and roadblocks to our students thriving, and I believe they need to be revisited. And the credit recovery one, revisited from the lens of when you're in college, you can get an incomplete. Once you take it, you have this semester only to retake this course or do this test, and whatever grade you earn will be replaced on your transcript, something along those lines. So anyway, this is why I brought it to the committee, for us to kind of look at, to see, to get more insight on what is our ability as far as that academic piece, and then the attendance piece, that we have a standard operating procedure that favors the students and also our institution, where students don't think they can just breeze in and out of school however they want to. I understand that. But when we have cases where people are following strict policies, that when we have parents calling in asking, hey, listen, medical paperwork showing this parent cannot walk and it was suddenly to the family. This elder child needs to take their siblings to school, and it's their first period is a study hall, and they're getting penalized for coming to school late, and it's not anything academic. Just to rethink this, and so that's why I brought it. I'm gonna be quiet now.
So I think in regards to the attendance, House Bill 420 is what is limiting our ability to do much with that. That is from the state. I believe that was maybe 2016 was House Bill 420 that really made our strict attendance situation, and it is, in my opinion, not great. It was my entire dissertation. It was the implementation of the difficulty of the implementation of House Bill 420. That's the only reason I know that. But as far as the grades go, I'm trying to go through here because I agree that as far as penalizing the students who have retaken something and it's not what we do in university and things like that. But do we know if there's a certain section in here that we can be looking at to potentially amending?
So, board member, Chair, Dr. Molinar, Ms. Jackson, to your point, so this has been something that we've been looking at this year because I've had some grave concerns when I discovered how we do credit recovery here, and there are some state statutes, guidelines, policies that sort of, I guess, hinder us being able, but the kid. So when we do the credit recovery, they actually take
It's a computer program.
yeah, I was trying to think of the name of it. They have several of them out there, but because I've used them in other places. But it's sort of a self-paced kind of thing, and the kid does it. But they would literally, I think the caveat here was they would have to have an actual teacher. It would have to be an actual class with an actual curriculum. And that's what we are running into, because I've worked this year to get an understanding of it, because it's impacting our athletes in particularly. So, and they do credit recovery, but they don't get, like, if you had an F in the course and you take the class over and you get a B, well, you don't get the B. You know, I was like, well, what if we even average the two together? So we're still working on just kind of getting an understanding of what that's looking like here in our district. But it was alarming to me when it was brought to me way back in December. And immediately I started asking questions. So I don't think it's going to be something that we can just fix overnight. But there are some state things that we would have to change how we do things here. in order for the kids to actually get the actual credit. In Akron. Yeah. And here in Akron. And that would be like, yeah, summer school, them having to, if we had like an evening academy where they could go and take the class, but
And
it's
that's
with
what I
a
was
certified
wondering.
teacher.
If we had like night school.
That's what I'm talking about, the
summer
evening
school. Yes,
academy.
sir. And because also what was alarming to me as when I started looking more into our credit recovery is that you have kids. When I'm talking about changing how they say it, like this the finish line, but then every time I get close to it, it gets pushed further back. Because you have, I don't even see how it's possible for me to be moved to my next, grade level or whatever, but I got 5 credits I need to recover. I've accumulated throughout my freshman, it just doesn't seem right to me that a student can accumulate so many credits that needs recovering. And I'm saying, yes, the student has to take responsibility. Everyone needs to, but a lot quicker, because then it almost seems, I'm saying this to you all, and anyone can try to have this conversation with me, and I'm open to it. How can I'm sitting as a junior, and I have my junior credits that I must complete on top of 5 credit recovery credits, that I need to recover.
You'd be surprised places I've been, just my experience, where kids are moved. They did not meet, like if they're supposed to get 6, I'm just saying arbitrarily, if they're supposed to get 6 credits in freshman, right, at the freshman level, they get 4, they get moved to, and now you're classified. You're sitting in classification of a sophomore, but you're really still a freshman because you haven't fulfilled all the requirements. And so it was around December when I started just asking several questions, just because I wanted to know how we do things here, just learning. And to my amazement, those are things that came up, in terms of the kids, the classification, the credit recovery. And it was brought to me because Mr. Vasilati and a committee came to me to talk about the athletes and what we could do to help support them. Because I was not in favor of lowering the GPA. In fact, I probably would raise it if I had the real power to do that. Yeah. Because I think if you're going to be an athlete, I want you to be stellar on the field or the court, but I also want you to be stellar in the classroom too. And so, but I wanted to just let you know that we have been working on this. It's just something that we're going to have to figure out, how do we get around, and we're not trying to do anything beyond what the state is saying, but when I say get around, I'm saying how we do things here, because that's where the discussion came up about me talking about evening academy. But we would have to work with our teachers to see how many of them would be willing to work in an evening academy. I mean, we would have to pay them, surely, but how many of them would be even willing to do that? And you're talking mainly high school, secondary, because it's Algebra 1, Geometry, and English 1, all those courses. But it was something about the state's policy, and that's kind of where things have been left, that it had to be a certified teacher, but it was some nuances, and so that's where we are right now. But as of probably, June? As of April, we were still having this conversation, because I just had some issues with the fact that if the child failed the class and takes it over, but they don't get the grade doesn't change, but you get credit. I don't understand that. So that's kind of where we are right now with it.
Madam Chair, I think, and Superintendent, I think it's called state law. And so what we're going to need to do is to get our legislators involved in this,
yes,
to offer an amendment to try and correct this issue, because I'm sure we're not the only school system that's dealing with this.
And it is hurting our kids.
And want to help our children, yes.
My question for this committee, and thank you for bringing this and thank you for the details, it does sound like a lot of this is not necessarily our APS policy, but we have a lot of operations and we have a lot of things that we want to maybe bridge to the State House. So would this be an appropriate possible presentation for instructional policy, and then let instructional policy to kind of take this over and then let us know if there's anything from the legal side that we can add legislatively? But it feels like, what do you think?
It is something that we can do a presentation on, just to bring awareness for everyone to understand where things are with this. And I think that, over the summer we can really massage this, but it is something that we can do a presentation on,
Because I want
just for the awareness,
Yeah.
so that people understand what we've been doing, and then what we have to do to meet the state's guidelines, and that would require us working with our legislators.
Okay, Madam Chair. Yeah, that's why I originally thought, because when I was researching, it's like this is maybe more of a legislative issue. However, to the superintendent's point, as far as what we can do as a district, if we really reevaluate like the offering of night school, of summer school, and then even the part, like the details when you said, because absolutely I think it should be a certified teacher, a credentialed teacher teaching it, but does it have to be, if we don't have it, enough response from our teachers within our district, which I don't think that would be a problem, but just say if we didn't, then because it's after hours, that we'll be able to employ other credentialed persons to instruct the class, and how would that be offered, the cost. So these are the things I wanted to come publicly, because I want people to know and for the community to get agitated, because we need to know, because if it's legislatively, then we need to get behind our legislators that support what we are doing and what we're trying to do. And we have some good ones from our district that have gone on to the legislator. But so these are the kind of discussions that the community needs to be informed of, and we need to act, because this has been going on for some time. And I've had people come to me and say they get to that senior year, I'm putting my air quotes up, because functionally I can sit at the pep rally as a senior. But then when I get here, and some parents, I'm not saying it's right or not, are like, I had no idea that this boy had to make up all these credits. And I'm thinking he about ready to graduate. And I do want to give a shout out to our AAA academies and things like that. They really work with our learners to move some along. But a lot of the students, they get disenfranchised and they're done. Because it's like I said, it's like how can I make this up, and why was this allowed to happen? So I think it's good, as you said, Madam Chair, that we have this discussion. And I think for legal policy and contracts, when we talk about the credit recovery, I'm more than happy to put this in my, because I know what I'm going to do. So that's a control thing, but I can look over and read into it. So I'm fine with this coming to instructional policy. I'm more than fine with that. And then for the attendance, because this is the academic side, for that attendance side, which you said is a state, I think you said reference House Bill 320?
Yeah, 4, yeah.
House Bill what, 324?
420.
420, okay, thank you. And so, because that I was not familiar with, so I want to look more into that, but also to see, because it is not consistent throughout our district, now, or throughout other districts, because I was talking about this, and someone whose child is in another district who looks like me as well, and the district is a suburban district. She said, oh, well, when my husband was sick with cancer, my daughter was late. I promise she was tardy, like she said the amount of time. She said, she said she still graduated, she still got her honor roll and everything. So in our district, too, you have some principles. It's subjective, I know we have policies, and policies really govern decision-making. So if I have the power to do it, I'm going to do it because the policy says I can. But you have some schools that work things out for their learner to thrive. And so I'm sharing this. I don't have a proper answer because we're not saying do anything illegal, but I have to look more into the House Bill 420.
Yeah, because that's what I want to say is that the law is not subjective. You know, the law is the law. And so I appreciate our superintendent and chief of staff follow the law. And they may have done that in another school district. They may have. But that doesn't necessarily mean they was following the law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got to read it.
And 420 is a great example of not just an unfunded state mandate, but it's actually a negatively funded state mandate. It not only hurts the student to mark them as absent, but also hurts the district. And we actually lose money. We lose funding for every student that is late and tardy. It is a really, really difficult, complicated thing that was made even more complicated by COVID and everything, which is why, you know, when we visited the State House, we talked about, you know, who is our lobbyist? What can we do? Because these are opportunities for us as a district. I don't know how much here we can do, but I just like with the equity and the finance committee talking about the sports, like here's an opportunity for us to do things for our district and for our kids.
You need a motion to refer this to instructional policy?
Do we? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna refer. That's what you want to send it to them? Sure. So I so move.
Second.
Okay, so it is 7:07, and we have done a lot, even though it's 7 o'clock. And actually, I think at this point we have done as much as sometimes in an entire year. But we currently, so policy status review, I do not believe we have any policies right now headed for a third and final reading. But for policies heading to the board agenda, so policies heading to the full board for a second reading, we have 6 policies going to the full board for a second reading. 10651 regular meetings, we're changing the word consult. 147 compensation is staying the same. This is the TLDR version for anyone, by the way, who only wants to watch part of these meetings. We're going to go through the whole meeting in 1 minute. 203 legislative, we're changing 6 to 2/3 or 5. Social media is staying the same. Committees is staying the same. Field and other district-sponsored trips is staying the same. We also have 3 items from roundtable going to the to the full board for a first read. 5120, we're changing issued to required, and possibly going to do a rules suspended first read for 5332 and 3 for those. So that is where we are as of now. Anything else before new business? Yes.
Madam Chair, are these new business employment of substitutes? Because it's a Neola issue, and I believe we said at the meeting we was going to try to expedite these when they came before us. Is this under new business? Where did I get this from? Employment of substitutes.
I think these are, yeah. It looks like we have 3 Neolas in new business.
Okay.
And so these are items, I think February was when we heard that there were Neola updates, and so now they are bringing us the February updates in June.
Do you want me to do it?
Sorry, I thought that you were.
Who's going to go first?
Okay, so since these are all in new business, then I'll be pretty short. So the first one is student assessment and academic intervention services.
Okay.
I don't know, are we planning on going through them at all, or because they are in new business?
So they're in new business, but they look written, and it sounds like it might be the will of the committee to put these for first read in committee.
Madam Chair, just from the conversation that we had, whereby we were told that some Neola things were not moving along fast enough, that we did commit to trying to make sure that we move those along. So which one of these items would that be? Are they all of the items, or?
So there are 3 items, but I think the reason they weren't moving along is because they just weren't brought to us,
I know.
because they're from February.
Yes, I understand they were not, but they are brought to us now.
Yes.
And so,
Yes, so these are all mandatory changes.
Okay.
And Neola sent us the changes, and so they're really minor. And so you can look at 2623 as it relates to assessments. It's saying that we need to make sure that we provide norm reference achievement tests, which we're already doing, norm reference achievement tests
Okay.
in all of our grade levels. And then also under, at the very end of the policy, it's saying that students cannot spend more than 2% of the school year taking state assessments and no more than 1% of school year on diagnostic or practice diagnostic assessments or practice assessments to prepare for the state assessments. And so that's already happening as well. But these are requirements that were mandatory that needed to be added.
So is 2623 a policy that is new to our district?
No. Wait, no. It's just these revisions, the versions
some updates.
are being updated
Updates.
with the adding that norm referenced assessments and then the piece about not spending more than 2% and 1% on state assessment and district diagnostic
Okay,
assessments.
so since this is where it gets confusing, I know we're trying to expedite things, but this is where it gets confusing, at least for me, because in new business, we don't usually discuss new business, we move it up. I don't know where to move it up because I'm not ready, I will say out loud, I'm not ready to do a first read of this because I don't know what this is presently, right? This is something usually when we have a policy, we see what it used to be, what it is now. I understand we don't have that now because that's not what we are planning to do now, but that does affect how we move forward.
Okay. So this is more, the policy that we had is pretty basic, and Neola has recommended, this is more actually detailed than the current policy we have right now.
Okay, so.
But we can bring back what we have now compared to what this policy is.
Yeah, I mean, we have all of these in new business, but now we're discussing things in new business and moving things all around, and I feel like if we're going to discuss things, we should discuss them in discussion so we can move other things forward and just be more clear. I don't want to do everything to every policy at every meeting, personally. So I am proposing to bring these to discussion for the next committee meeting.
Madam Chair, when is the next committee meeting?
Good question. It's usually every month, but I guess this time it's August 19. So that's a long way away. Go ahead.
Tell me the date. You said August when?
19th.
Okay, when is the first day of school? Oh, the 29th.
August
So like
29th.
So like maybe 2 weeks before school starts. Okay. The reason why I was asking, because some of these updates are interested in with the diagnostics. Like right now, I know we're using in our school in iReady, a lot of things that some teachers probably sent home instructions as far as for summer slide, as far as time for the students to spend possibly on iReady. I'm just saying this could happen, and which would be contrary to what this is saying, because 1% of time, 2% of time in the scheme of what, if we say in the school day, the hours within the school day. So I think it does, as an educator, this raised flags for me, because I was wondering, you know, we look at the scores, the children's testing scores, which says how the district is doing, and we spend time. I don't believe in letting computers teach kids, but when we for our diagnostics, we spend time on the children reading, evaluating what the data tells us about their reading, and preparing them for the state test. So this is something in my own, I'm like, this is interesting that will want to be decreased. And the rationale behind it, because I didn't read it thoroughly. I just heard them say no more than 1% and 2%. When each class period, currently as it's set, they part of the classroom structure. When I was visiting the classroom, they had a time where they get on their iReady, they do their iReady assessment. It's built in the schedule of the class. So, yeah, but it's important. That's why I said when we were talking about passing it, because if we're looking at August, the teachers will have to plan and be ready by the 29th, because they're already planning for how their classroom is going to flow, what the schedule is going to be like, the timing that they're going to have each student spend on iReady, also what they're sending home, the teachers that prepare. So that's the only reason I'm mentioning this. If we're not meeting till August, I don't have an answer. I'm just for consideration to the committee.
Yeah, I also don't have an answer. I just have a frustration. I have a frustration that I feel like these need to be discussed. I feel like they also need to be expedited. We can't expedite and discuss things, and so I'm frustrated that these are from February, and we are once again in an emergency situation for something that didn't need to be an emergency. So I am just expressing, I guess, that frustration and saying that unfortunately, I would really like to discuss these, especially because of experiences that my child had here on his third grade reading exam and the computer preparation for it and things like that. So I would like to review and discuss these policies.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to say, to me, this is me speaking, this is an example of when it comes to Neola updates that are mandatory. I really think they need to be at the front of our agenda for these committee meetings. I know this process was already discussed in my absence from a meeting, but I agree, this does warrant further discussion. But now here we are at this time.
But Madam Chair, even if it was at the front of the agenda, it would make it a difference from what Member Molinar is saying. She would still say that we still should send it for first, keep it in committee. That's what you're saying, right?
Well, what I'm saying is it doesn't matter. It's not that we don't have time to discuss it because it's 7/17.
Right.
It's that it's new business, even though months ago we knew about this new business. Right. And so part of me, I feel bad that it's going to take another month, but at the same time, we've known about these.
Disagreeing
I'm
with you.
not sure.
Because Chief of Staff, you said that these are mandatory.
Correct. And I'm not sure about, we just had a meeting, our policy meeting. We just had a meeting, was it last month?
2 weeks ago.
Okay, regarding the mandatory updates with Neola. So I didn't understand we've known about this since February. We knew they were coming. We know that Neola has mandatory updates that are coming. And so we met about these a couple of weeks ago. In between the last time and this time the committee met, and then these are the mandatory updates with Neola. The 3GG, the assessments, and employment of substitutes.
You went into what I was going to ask. To clarify, you answered the question, because I recall a meeting that I sat in where we were talking about the Neola and how they needed to get moved ahead, and that even in that meeting it was said we have all these now, what we had now, which we move forward, and that there were others that will be coming, and so we just wanted to do a better way, have a better system and agenda of moving them forward.
Right.
So my question was going to be, which I think you answered, because Member Molnar, when she said February, because I remember the last meeting, Member Molnar stating that some of the things that were brought up, she said it wasn't on the agenda because she didn't have it to be on the agenda. And so I don't want to speak for you, can clarify if that's what you were saying now. So I just want to be clear, because it seems like there's no, if we don't have the information to move it ahead earlier, if it's given earlier, then that is problematic, because this is stuff that we want to read through. But then I think, Chief of Staff, when you just were speaking, you were saying something different, which I felt like was answering my question, but I'm unclear that, no, we didn't have these policies that we're asking you about now.
I did not have these until we met with our policy committee, which was in between, I don't know, I have so many meetings, but it was in between the last time this committee met and now. So I know we had our, because we're going to have an ongoing monthly policy committee meeting where we do have more mandatory ones coming, but we still need to meet as a committee and work through those. But what I'm hearing, because what we want to do is make sure that we're providing you with all the information you need to make a sound decision, and nothing is being done intentionally, but this is also a learning. This is the first time that Defabal and I have worked on the policy committee and actually on this committee. So we want to make sure that we're bringing things to you the way that's going to help you make the best decision possible. And what I'm hearing is that you would like to see the current policy as well as the mandatory updates that Neola is recommending at the same time. And so we can do that moving forward.
But just to be clear, you didn't have this. That's what I just want, because we're on a recorded meeting.
Correct.
And I just want to make sure everyone's clear that you didn't have this since February.
I did
and they're
not.
bringing it
I
now.
did not have this since
Okay,
February.
that's why,
that is
that's
correct.
the clarification, because I just want everyone to know and clear, because we talk, I don't want it to seem like nothing is, we talk about as transparency. So I just want everyone to be clear on what we're
Absolutely.
saying as far as, I'm in agreement with what's said. Thank you.
We didn't have the policies.
I just went back to the said, because it said they've been since February on a recorded meeting, so I want clarification.
Correct.
I'm sorry, I'm not on the mic. I just wanted clarification that when it came from you to us, it's not, like you said, it was in between one meeting. Chief of Staff, giving it to you
Correct.
expeditiously as I received it.
Correct.
And so we're just trying to get this worked out, as Member Monar has mentioned and as we're discussing, so that we're in sync and that we're
Absolutely.
doing things right, like we all want to do. And so we're better together. And so I think moving forward, we'll get this.
Good slogan.
We'll get this
Right.
together.
Additional comments? Okay, so that's our 3 Neola updates. It looks like there's also one here, 8660 incidental transportation of students by private vehicle. Yes.
Chief of Staff, you said about the mandatory recommended updates. So if we go
Not recommend, or mandatory.
just straight up mandatory.
Correct.
Okay, that's what.
Well, one last question. So what problems is this going to cause? Our next meeting is not until August 19th. The school is going to start 2 weeks later.
Well, I mean,
Is this-
the 3GG one, there's requirements around REMPs, a few changes there. We would still need to make sure our principals are educated and prepared around what the changes are as it relates to requirements with our REMPs and other interventions that have to be provided with students who are behind. And so we would need to educate people on that. And then the employment of substitutes, there really wasn't a change, that much of a change, other than we're not using people who do not have a bachelor's degree. So that shows that in here. And Mike, are you able to speak to the health services one, the 5310?
They look at,
We're adding similar.
that is
just say it out
another
loud.
mandatory.
The health services one is the required new law regarding having feminine hygiene.
Correct.
Yes, we have, yes.
Basically advised we have been doing this for
Correct.
a very long time within Akron Public Schools of just being codified in the policy.
Okay, so that's taken care of.
Thank you, Deb.
So it sounds like, Madam Chair, it sounds like it's just one. Is it the one that would maybe be problematic? The employment of substitutes, they must have a bachelor's degree.
Yes, a professional Ohio license, substitute teacher license. And in order to get that, you have to have a bachelor's degree. And they have to show evidence that they have that before getting paid or starting employment.
And if we don't, Madam Chair, if we don't, and Chief of Staff, if we don't adopt this, then you're not going to be able to put this policy out? Or
Well, we
what are
already,
gonna do?
we do right
You do
now.
require it?
Well, it's weird, like all the things that they're mandating us to do, we, like Mrs. Folk was saying, we already provide free hygiene materials for our students when they need it as it relates to feminine products. And then we are already going to hire people who are credentialed, and we don't start them on the clock for payment until they have their proper licensure. But this helps with putting the practice into policy.
So operationally, if all 4 of these passed, what would you do differently next year than if they don't pass?
Well, one thing is we would still review all the requirements under 3GG. So as it relates to providing intensive intervention, so even though we do that with our students who are not on track. So some of the new language in here is high dosage tutoring opportunities align with the student's classroom instruction. High dosage tutoring shall include additional instruction time of at least 3 days per week or at least 50 hours over 36 weeks. So we do like Akron after school, but those things are like optional. But knowing that this is something that is required, it's different. It's a different conversation if you are a leader in the building and you're trying to get licensed teachers to take those assignments rather than trying to fill them with people who are non-certified. So it's just a different conversation that our leaders would have in the building regarding the required things that we did just because we knew there were best practices.
I don't know. There's 4 policies that I have not read. There's 4 policies that I would like to know what the original thing is. It's 4 different conversations. We've now spent almost half an hour on new business. I suppose if we wanted to have an additional meeting, we could have an additional meeting. Or we could just blindly put through things that we've never read because it's only going to change our stuff a little bit.
Well, Madam Chair, I'm offended by that. Now, I have read all of these. As I sit here, I've read all of these, and I have comprehended them. So to say that we're putting something through that we have not read is not correct. I'm very offended that you would say that.
I apologize.
Thank you.
I have not.
Thank you. But as I said before, there's 2 members on this committee and the president, and so and we still vote by majority. So, Madam President, would you like to?
With these being Neola updates, I'm comfortable moving forward with them so that, again, the work of the district can be done. And so if that means moving this forward for the first reading so that we can be prepared, I am okay with that as president and as a board member.
So let me just say this, Madam Chair, with all due respect, and I do respect and I do support you. However, these are mandatory issues. I have read these. It's pretty simple reading. It's real simple reading, and I comprehend this, and I think that I understand these. Now, the other option would be that these could just be offered at the board meeting. We could suspend the rules, and we could vote on them that way. And that we would have time throughout the next, between now and the next board meeting to get the answers that board member, that the chair would like answers to, and we would make sure that everyone has an opportunity to read those if they so desire to do that. We can do that. But, and I do want to show all deference to you as the chair, but at the same time, I also want this administration to be able to have the leeway to do what they need to do, so when they don't do it, that I can come back and complain to them about them not doing what they said they were going to do, because I want to hold them responsible too. And I share your same frustration, because we were told that there were things that we were not moving on, and when we were asked, and we really didn't have those, but then the chief of staff is saying they knew they were coming, and so they was giving us heads up, but we didn't have anything to read, we didn't have anything to see. So this is the first time that we have, and I've sit here and did read these, because it is pretty easy reading. But I'm just trying to bring a solution. I don't want to just be a part of the problem. I want to bring solutions. So one solution we could do is offer these at the regular board meeting and give us time to respond, get any questions that we have. Even though I don't really have any questions, but
I appreciate your, sorry to interrupt, I appreciate both your comments and your recommendations. I appreciate that. And I do think that as a Neola update, it would be an appropriate opportunity to, as you said, suspend the rules.
And just so we would still have the opportunity to see any answers, responses to the questions that the committee may have, and an opportunity to have it on the agenda for vote passage at our next board meeting.
Okay, yes, and I will share the original policies that we have currently as it relates to the Neola updated ones, the mandatory ones.
Thank you. So 8660, incidental transportation of students by private vehicle. Is this Neola also, or is this something different?
This is just a recommendation from the committee, and I'm going to have Mr. Deffabaugh speak on that.
Correct. I mean, we received information as part of our internal review committee to move all of these policies through. The attorney who represented us advised us that she would like to go ahead and repeal sections in here, so that's what we are doing, or recommending to the board.
I don't think I have that.
I don't either.
Is this another doesn't sound like
time that we would need to?
This is not mandatory, no. Yeah, this can wait.
Okay.
And I apologize. Heidi is out, and I didn't get a chance to go through these, but she was kind enough to print them out for us. So that's on me for there not being an extra copy in there, but it is on the online agenda, I believe. So it's accessible there.
Being that she's out and all of this was still together, like, seriously, I hope Heidi is not watching this while she's out, but thank you, Heidi. But would it be okay then to have this in discussion for our August 19 meeting?
So move.
Yes, that would be fine, yes.
Okay. And the last item of new business that's not on here, 606 other policies to discuss. In our last committee meeting, we discussed the sign-up sheet for people who in the community who wanted to sign up. So I asked Ruth for the current sign-up sheet, and what she sent, and I believe she sent it to everyone, there was already a column there for other topics to discuss.
Okay.
And so it was my opinion from reviewing what Ruth had already made that I don't think it needed to be dramatically changed for the committees. If somebody else feels differently, let me know, but that was my last update on that. Anybody else? Comments, questions, discussions, concerns? We are adjourned at 7:34.